Thank you very much, Enrico. And of course, good morning to all participants, and special greets to the colleagues involved in this project. Actually, I know them since many years, and it's nice to realize that we still, in some sense, are traveling together. Well, first of all, I would like to thank the organizer for involving me in this event and congratulate those involved in this project for its high value. And being the last speaker is good or bad, it depends. But generally, it helps the speaker to take some notes and reflection. That's what I did. And generally, dealing with this kind of issue requires some very general reflection, and I would like to share some of them with you. The issue of the need to define gender equality indicators was very well represented by all the speakers who preceded me. But I will skip any reflection related to gender equity or equality during the health emergency that we lived. Just to mention how the smart working issue produced some very deep inequalities between different social groups, as we know. Some of these reflections have been already dealt by some colleagues, in particular Christian, but I would like to go into some details. For example, from the conceptual point of view. Well, introducing the issue of equity, equality in the debate, not only the scientific debate, but also, and above all, I would say, the public debate is fundamental from my point of view. In relation to the theme posed by this project, different perspectives arise. If we want to measure the country's outcome in terms of well-being of a nation, we should talk about equity, which means respect for diversity. But if we want to measure the process of building opportunities within a country, in this case, we need to talk about equality. So the two concepts, equity and equality, are not the same as we know, but should be applied in different contexts with also in terms of indicators. The first is related to the outcome, equity, and the second is related to the opportunities, equality. I would say both, of course, play an important role in any society. Uh, and Christian mentioned this different concept in his presentation, actually. I would suggest difference very, very clear, even because conceptual definitions, as we know, change over time from one area to another among different social subjects. So we need to be clear also about the our goal in terms of indicators construction, what we really want to monitor. That is because any definition should be shared with the populations that are monitored and not dropped from above. And this is a kind of critical criticism also, a criticism from my side to some exercise coming from the top. Indicators, some reflections concerning indicators. As many of you know, Italy, in the BEST project, the project that provided our countries with a system of indicators, has introduced this theme by, this theme is equity, by attributing, ascribing it to the whole theme of well-being, fair well-being, within which the theme we are talking about today arises. In other words, measuring the well-being of the country means checking, verifying whether this well-being is equally distributed among social groups, generations, gender, and so on. But we are talking about equity, not equality. But also we need to check and to verify if this well-being is distributed among different territories in the same way, in a fair way, which is not the same way. The two perspectives of equity among different social groups and across these different territories must inevitably cross each other. And that is what we are talking about. We need to territorialize the indicators by carry on also the idea of equity, which means the fairness of distribution of opportunities between different groups, and we should be able to compare different areas concerning that. Of course, in general, the issue of territorializing indicators and therefore also data will be an increasingly important issue, and many efforts will have to be made in this direction. And then we should get over the idea of having also composite indicators. I don't want to get into this discussion and debate, but maybe we should get over that the only solution that we have is in order to have a narrative, a synthetic narrative, is only the composite indicators. So be careful. It's important to develop indicators based on the availability of data, of course, but it is equally important to push the production of official data, not only in terms of territorial breakdown, but also of new measures. So a project like this should also have this aim to push official statistics to produce new data, new measures, because we need. In the case of the measurement of gender equity, equality, I mentioned why we should separate these two issues. I would like to ask one last question with respect to which we must pay close attention. The definition and selection of indicators must be done with particular attention, because particular attention should be paid more to equity. This is my position. This I mentioned before, but why? And this requires verifying that the indicators do not become a sort of monitoring of the level of adequacy of women to the male model. This is the idea of equality. But talking about equity has a sort of idea of more respect towards the differences, because the differences are there, differences in nature and biology. They have to measure the contribution of women to the well-being of the country, which is different. For example, the number of women on board of directors. What is the meaning of that? It's very important, but it does not measure the contribution of women to the well-being of the country. It measures the adaptation of women to the male model. This is my point of view. And let me share with you some other very general issue. Why we need indicators? Of course, monitoring is the first need. But all this must allow should support the accountability of policies. The other theme that is behind the question and the issues posed by the project presented here. The evaluation of the effects of the public intervention but put in place is today more and more frequently referred to in the discussion of the quality of public policies at all levels, national levels, international levels, but also at local level. The use of time and resources to analyze the outcomes of planned and implemented interventions, therefore, finds increased legitimacy as a necessary activity to improve the planning of development of policies and their ability to achieve results in the future. If in the context of scientific and professional comparisons, this may even seem obvious. This is an exercise that we apply generally. It is not so for the administrations, public administrations, but also private administrations involved in the implementation of these policies. For these administrations, there are in fact considerable spaces for progress and learning, which can be determined by a more systematic practice of evaluation, both ex ante and also ex post. By concluding my intervention, I would say that this activity requires on one hand a solid conceptual definition of the reality, and it is characterized by complexity, as it is the reality is multidimensional, interconnected, and so on and so forth. Its volatility, as it is constantly changing, with changes occurring at different speed and intensities. The reality is not a fixed situation. It is characterized by uncertainty, as it does not allow for the prediction of the event and the actions produce unpredictability and not always clear effects, uncertainties. And it is characterized by ambiguity as unstable and difficult to be interpreted, with an evolution of events that can take different directions. So even the information extracted by the reality data is affected by these characteristics. Again, complexity, volatility, uncertainty, and ambiguity, and requires a correct approach to their management in order to create appropriate indicators. Just to conclude my contribution to the debate, A correct construction of indicators should require development of concept, as we know, quality of life, quality of society, equity, equality, inequality, poverty, fragility, sustainability, of course. Different domains, which are segments of the reality: health, education, social relations, networks, social services, environment, territories, civil economy, finance, and so on and so forth, and correct methods, which should be respectful to the complexity of the reality. So we need to adopt lateral and transversal thinking, systemic, relational, not linear approaches. Complex analysis, such as neural network, self-organizing map, complexity, statistics, and so on and so forth, data mining, deep learning. And finally, my message is to have more respect. This is something is a concern for myself mainly, and I want to transmit this also to all of you, to have much more respect of the complexity of the reality, and not having the goal to push all together into one row. Respect also the differences. Many thanks for your attention.